Hello everyone, welcome back to another Project Gladiator weather forecast. Today I am going to be covering the weather for June 14th of 2023. Currently we have the first moderate setup for my YouTube career. This is going to be in the Dixie Valley, extending all the way from parts of western Georgia all the way into parts of northeastern Louisiana, across Mississippi and Alabama. We also have an enhanced risk that goes all the way out into the Georgian coast, all the way to the Texas area, through Arkansas and Louisiana, as well as another slight risk that goes up to the Tennessee border, into northern Florida, and into north central Texas. We also have a pretty large marginal threat that extends into central Texas, up through north central Texas, into eastern Oklahoma, as well as parts of southern Tennessee, into parts of South and North Carolina, and into parts of northern Florida. Our threats for this include a 10% tornado threat. For this area in particular, I'll get into why that is in our pivotal weather models, but we do have a hatch significant threat with this, so that means that we could possibly see violent tornadoes today, the possibility of EF2 to EF5 tornadoes in this area, as well as a 5% for the entire spectrum on top of a 2% for the entire region. We do have a 45% damaging wind threat on a hatch significant threat. What the hatch significant threat means is that there's a 10% or greater probability of wind gusts up to 65 knots or greater within this area. This is on top of a 30%, which is on top of a 15%, which is on top of a 5%. As for our hail threats, we do have a hatch significant threat on a 30% and 15% further out west compared to where that moderate threat is. This is going to allow for the possibility of some very large to gorilla-sized hail for mostly in this region. I'll get to why that is. There is a little bit of a marginal threat for the New York City area into Massachusetts and Connecticut and northern New Jersey. I likely will not get onto this at all in today's forecast because of this down here, but there is a 5% wind threat and a 5% hail threat for that marginal threat up north. Taking a look at our pivotal weather model, starting off with our 500 millibars, you can see the very strong jet streak that is moving across the Texas moderate threat, southern Dixie Valley area in this region in particular. This has very strong mid-level flow in the mid to possibly the upper 60s in some regions, and the mid to upper 50s, 50 knots. This is going to trigger severe weather development, as well as provide the possibility of some very strong, very strong mid to low level shear for not only our tornado threat, but also the possibility of our very large damaging hail threat. Taking a look at our 700 millibars, you can see that we still have that shortwave trough that's moving through the area, and boy is it strong. It is a monster right now. It is at 40 knots to possibly 30 knots and possibly even the 50 knots in some regions. This is going to be a really strong triggering factor for very strong mid to low level shear, as well as also aid in triggering severe weather development in the moderate threat area. Taking a look at our composite reflectivity before we look at our dew points is because I want to touch on our various storm modes for today and what might be triggering our different threats. So you immediately see a bunch of scattered supercells around the southern Alabama area into parts of eastern Georgia. This is going to be our 10% tornado threat. All of these supercells right here could be tornado producing, as well as produce strong damaging outflow gusts, as well as some very large hail could be possible with these discrete supercells in particular. As they continue eastward, they easily get cut off by this little line here that is expected to move through the area, but this is only the first line that is expected to move through this region in particular. You can see back towards the Arkansas, Texas, and Louisiana area, we have some again, more scattered, more discrete supercells back towards southern Arkansas, which could also be tornadic and very large hail producing and strong damaging winds. They are expected to organize as they go into Mississippi, and as they continue east, they form a very strong line, and as they continue east, they are going to produce very large hail, as well as the possibility of some embedded tornadoes and some very strong damaging winds as well. We do have the possibility today with this line in particular for the possibility of a derecho moving through Alabama into Georgia and northern Florida. If you don't know what a derecho is a squall line, not really any isolated supercell, but a squall line, which could be tornado producing, but it has the possibility of some very strong damaging straight line winds, possibly tornado force winds in straight lines. That's what a derecho is. So we have the possibility of that going into southern Alabama, Georgia, and northern Florida. Taking a look at our dew points, let's start off with the area where we can see those scattered supercells in southern Alabama in that 2% or 10% tornado threat region. You can see that we have very strong dew points in the mid to low 70s and possibly the upper 60s in some regions, but it's mostly going to be in the mid to low 70s. This is going to contribute to very strong instability depending on our lapse rates. But then let's take a look at the dew points back towards the southern Arkansas, Texas, and Louisiana region. We have very strong dew points, more so compared to the scattered supercells back towards southern Alabama. This is going to have dew points possibly in the mid to upper 70s in the southern Arkansas region, which will trigger possibly some much stronger instability compared to the scattered supercell region back towards southern Alabama. Back in this area where we could see those more combined and merged together supercells. And the semi-discrete supercells, we have some stronger dew points, which could lead to the possibility of some stronger instability depending on our lapse rates. Taking a look at our lapse rates, let's start off with the area where we could see those scattered supercells in that 10% tornado threat area. We have some fairly strong lapse rates in the mid to upper 7s and possibly the low 8s in some regions. With the very strong moisture, we could possibly see some upper 3,000s and possibly some low 4,000s, which will be very strong and allow for some tornadic development depending on our wind shear, as well as the possibility of some very large hail. Then let's take a look at the Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana region, where we can see some fairly strong lapse rates as well. The lapse rates here are not really going to be as prominent as down in southern Alabama, but they will definitely allow for the possibility of some stronger instability compared to southern Alabama with those deeper dew points. Again, possibly in the 4,000s, possibly the upper 4,000s, in the 4,500s, and the upper 3,000s. Taking a look at our CAPE, let's start off with southern Alabama and those discrete supercells. You can already see that we have tons of instability in the mid to upper 3,000s and possibly the 4,000s in some regions. This is really going to contribute to our tornado threat depending on our wind shear, as well as allow for the possibility of some strong damaging outflow gusts, as well as the possibility of some very damaging winds going into southern Alabama as they move into western Georgia. Then let's take a look at the instability back towards the southern Arkansas, Texas, and Louisiana area. We get some fairly strong instability in the mid to upper 4,000s. This is really going to allow for the possibility of some very strong supercells with some very large hail, as well as the possibility of some very strong damaging outflow gusts, as well as the possibility of tornadoes, depending on our wind shear back over here. Because of how strong this instability is, I would not be surprised if we get some very strong supercells to develop in this region in particular. After supercells do develop in southern Arkansas, as they continue eastward, you can see that we do keep very strong instability ahead of that line to contribute to our very strong damaging wind threat, our hail threat, and the possibility of some embedded tornadoes with that possible derecho that moves through southern Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia, and northern Florida. Very strong instability will again allow for the possibility of some embedded tornadoes depending on our wind shear, as well as the possibility of some very large hail, as well as some very strong damaging winds. Again, possibly straight line wind tornado force winds. Taking a look at our wind shear, let's start off with the discrete supercells, scattered supercells in southern Alabama. You can see that we have very strong wind shear and very sufficient wind shear in the region with values in the 40 knots to 50 knots. This is really going to allow for some violent tornadoes today, moving into southern Alabama and western Georgia. With these discrete supercells, again, we could possibly see some very violent tornadoes, as well as the possibility of some very large hail with this wind shear as well. Then let's take a look at the first line that is expected to move through the area. We see some fairly strong wind shear ahead of that, as well as the possibility of some fairly strong instability. Sorry, I didn't really check the instability on this line earlier, but we do have some fairly strong wind shear ahead of it, and I think also there's going to be some fairly strong instability ahead of it. I don't think that's going to be going away with this line in particular, so we could see some embedded tornadoes through northern Mississippi, northern Alabama, and across parts of Georgia. This is going to allow, again, for the possibility of some embedded tornadoes, as well as the possibility of some very large hail and damaging winds with that first line. And then back towards the Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas region with those more combined supercells, we also have some very, very strong wind shear as well. We could possibly see some tornadoes with these supercells as they rapidly organize and move through Mississippi and Alabama. You can see that we also have some fairly strong wind shear ahead of that line, with that fairly strong instability as well, moving through Mississippi, southern Alabama, western Georgia, and northern Florida. That is really going to allow for the possibility of some very, very large hail, as well as some strong damaging winds and the possibility of some embedded tornadoes. Now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out the socials for Project Gladiator, and make sure, if you live in this moderate threat area or any area in particular that I've covered, make sure you have your tornado ready plan in place, as well as your plan for very destructive winds and very destructive hail if you live in this area in particular. And then also join the Discord for any updates on Project Gladiator and any updates on this very strong, significant severe weather possibilities today. And hopefully I will see you guys tomorrow with another forecast.